Welcome back, dear travelers, to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your hosts, Fox. Today, we've lost Sparrow to the hidden realms known as summer vacation, so it will be just me. This works well because recently I've read 2 books based in and around Hong Kong that deal with folklore, folk tradition, and historical fantasy, and they are the inspiration for this episode. Now, I love seeing the intersection between folklore and historical retellings, especially when the historical context plays such a huge role in the development of the story itself. And Hong Kong is also somewhere we haven't researched before or really looked into folklore-wise, so this will be an undertaking for us. However, before we dive into our legend today and into the 2 books later on, I want to give a very, very brief history of Hong Kong so we can understand where the story traditions come from. The region of Hong Kong includes 2 main islands as well as lots of smaller ones, but the 2 main islands are Hong Kong Island and Lantau Island, as well as the Kowloon Peninsula and the New Territories. The area has been inhabited since the Old Stone Age before it became part of the Chinese Empire, starting with the Qin Dynasty in 221 to 206 BC. The indigenous inhabitants of Hong Kong included the Punti, the Hakka, the Tanka, and the Hoklo people. However, large numbers of people from mainland China escaped or immigrated to Hong Kong throughout the decades. Later, the Chinese Empire fought the British during the First Opium War in 1839 to 1842, when the emperor cracked down on the illegal opium trade. This ended with the Treaty of Nanking, which handed Hong Kong Island over to the British, and they held it till about 1997, except for a brief period of time during World War II when Japan occupied the area for a couple years. So, Hong Kong is a place full of different folklore traditions and influences. Namely, we have a clash of cultures and traditions as Chinese customs and stories came into conflict with the stories brought over by the British colonial powers. Also, as a fishing port and trade hub, the area has a transmission of many different storytelling traditions coming in and out of port. And I did try searching for Hoklo, Tanka, or Hakka folklore, but that will have to be a different episode because there is so much more research that is involved with that part. However, I did find lots and lots of research and references to a goddess called Tinhua, and that led me down a rabbit hole. So, dear travelers, we won't have to dock to hear this tale of a seafaring goddess. This is the legend of the goddess Mazu. She's also known by other names including Heavenly Empress, Heavenly Princess, Holy Mother, but Mazu or Granny is the most commonly used name. Her legend starts with her birth in 960 to the fisherman Lin family located in Fujian province. It is said that when she was born, she did not cry for a month, and so she was named Lin Mo or Lin Moniang, meaning the silent Lin. As she grew up, her family noticed something else that was odd about her. She would fall into a deep trance and would claim to see divine visions. Her family believed her, especially when it came to her fortune-telling abilities. For a fishing family, nothing was more important than the weather, and having a daughter who could tell you exactly what the weather was going to be and what the forecast was looking like was a blessing. One day, Lin Mo was at her loom when she fell into a deep trance. Her father and brothers had gone fishing that day when a hurricane began to form. Their boat was capsized in the huge waves and their bodies thrown into the rapid currents. Mo saw all of this happen in her trance, and she was able to project herself to her brothers. She pulled them all to land one by one and went for her father. But as she went to reach for him, she was shaken awake by her mother. When she opened her eyes, her mother was standing before her with a worried expression, but she knew that her father was lost. Now, in other more happy versions of this tale, she saves everyone, and in still others, she saves everyone, including her father, except for one brother. So this always changes depending on which version you read. I personally like the one where she saves everybody. There are other versions as well where she spends 3 days searching for her father's body, and one telling of how she became a goddess is that she was so distraught that she couldn't save her dad, that she threw herself from the cliffs and transcended to a celestial form. So because of this story, and as well as others meaning that claim that she was a strong swimmer when she was younger, she is seen as a seafaring protector, and many temples in her honor are visited by captains, sailors, and traders actually. They say that her red robes fill the sky as a warning before a storm, and that to call upon her in times of need, it's best to use the name Mazu. If you use any of her more formal names, she might busy herself getting dressed and prepared before visiting you, and then you might be lost to sea for that. She is also famously one of the goddesses that never marries. But there is a famous story that is not found in any written form, but that is found in murals. In it, she's arranged to marry a man that a matchmaker and her parents chose. However, at the time of the marriage, she created a butterfly, which is a way of saying she made a duplicate. And in the mural, you can see her sitting there, but you can also see a butterfly about her head. On the wedding night, her real self sailed home on a tree trunk, while her double remained in her place. And as always, we always have to have something with demons, and so a further myth about her involves two generals. One is called Eyes That Can See 1,000 Miles, or 1,000-mile eyes, and the other one is Ears That Can Hear the Wind, or With the Wind Ear. Very creative names, at least we know exactly what they do. In the legend, both of them asked for her hand in marriage, and she agreed to marry the one who could defeat her in combat. During her fight, she used her mastery of martial arts skills to take down both demons, and instead of marrying her, they both promised to be her guardians instead. So, we know a lot about her different stories and legends and traditions, and a lot of it comes from, well, a lot of my research comes from a short novel called, I'm going to try and say this in the way it was written, but the translation is Story of Our Mother, the Heavenly Princess, or Tianfi Xianshenglu, written by Wu Huanshu. And we also have a lot of murals and paintings and sculptures. There is a wonderful article by Klaas Ruitenbeek called Mazu, the Patroness of Sailors in Chinese Pictorial Art, that details a vast number of paintings, sculptures, and murals. And the ones that I was most fascinated by were from a small temple, the Temple of Divine Mercy, and it was apparently found during the Song Dynasty in the year 1098. And there's a founding story that comes with this temple. So one day, a bronze tripod came floating to shore, and no one really knew what to make of it. But that night, every villager had the same dream, where a voice told them that the goddess Mazu was there to bring prosperity to their village. And that's why they used the tripod and they built an entire temple devoted to her. In this temple, there are murals by artist Zhu Yihao that depict Mazu's legends. And in it, panels 6 to 7 tell the story of her saving her brothers. Panels 19 to 36 deal with the story of the two generals. However, in it, it's a little bit different because one of the heavenly goddesses orders Mazu to subdue the two demons. After 1,000 Eyes was the one he was pretending to be a girl, and he was luring people into his cave before eating them. So it wasn't a good look for them. And after she defeated them, they agreed to be her generals or her protectors. To me, Mazu represents a living legend, a goddess that has many names, iterations, and as a seafaring goddess, one that has traveled throughout the world as she protects those who immigrate. Temples dedicated to her have traveled as far as Los Angeles, and her story has traveled along with her worshippers to Vietnam, Hong Kong, Macau, Japan, Malaysia. And as a goddess of seafaring, I thought her legend would be fitting for an episode about Hong Kong, and you may be wondering why. She was born in Fujian province. Well, her story was spread and carried by Chinese sailors and people as they moved to Hong Kong region and to Hong Kong Island. So many different cultures, storytelling traditions, and pantheon of gods came into contact at harbors and ports, and Hong Kong has historically been a powerful harbor. In Hong Kong particularly, she's known as Tin Hua, and her temples, festivals, and rituals are an important part of the culture for fishermen and for other people who often go into sea. So, speaking of blending of myths and tales in Hong Kong, I want to briefly just touch upon the two books that I read that, coincidentally, were both published last month. And they both have elements of Chinese folklore as well as a setting in Hong Kong. So the first one is Fishbone Cinderella by Elizabeth Lim, and the second one is Harbour of Hungry Ghosts by Eliza Chan. And both of them explore the rich tapestry of Chinese folklore and fairy tales, along with the vibrant setting of Hong Kong through different historical time periods. Harbour of Hungry Ghosts ruthlessly tackles the political, spiritual, and social upheaval of British colonialism through folklore. It's set during the Opium War era, and everything kind of comes to a head between British and Chinese influences in the region. The protagonist is Kiam Ling, who uses her qi and demon hunting knowledge to keep the spirits happy and the monsters vanquished. But soon she comes face to face with a new set of monsters. Since this book deals heavily with colonialism and the British influence, there is a lot of racism, prejudice, and kind of how the Chinese people, the mainlanders, as well as the people who were Hong Kong natives, how everyone was kind of treated by the British and how they treated each other. And you have a blend of the traditions and culture that existed before the British got there, and then how it all kind of melds together into this new monster that Kiam Ling has to fight. Meanwhile, Fishbone Cinderella quietly weaves a fairy tale into a story of a young girl caught in a family curse that she knows nothing about. This story spans generations, continents, and lifetimes, and Lim's book is a very tender examination of home and belonging that was based on her own grandmother's story of what life was like during Japanese occupation of China. There was life in Hong Kong, and then also immigrating to America. So I received both books from NetGalley in advance, and I read them back to back. And I was worried when I read them back to back that they'd be too similar. But once I realized that one was set in, Opium era of Hong Kong and one was set during World War II era, I realized these are two very different stories. So I got to see a budding Hong Kong through Chan's early 18,000s world, full of the supernatural and kind of this mix between what modern day is going to look like and what it looked like in the past, especially since Kiam Ling, the protagonist, had traveled there from Canton, and she was also kind of a migrant to this new land. Then we also have Fishbone Cinderella, which, again, the main character, she travels to Hong Kong to escape the Japanese occupiers and the results of what they had left in her area, her home. And so she goes to Hong Kong to live with her father and her stepmother. And what unravels is so it's called the Chinese Cinderella or Fishbone Cinderella, because there's an entirely different tradition of fairy tales of the Cinderella trope, but it involves fish and this magic fish and its bones as kind of the fairy godmother type. But to read more about that, you have to check out our website, the review on our website, as well as our Instagram. And honestly, I hope I get to read more historical fantasy books. I am really liking the boom that this genre is having at the moment. I know that we had a period where we were weaving the fairy tales into the modern day, and now it seems to be weaving the folk tales and fairy tales into the past, and kind of creating alternate versions of a historical time period. So, travelers, I think that's why the story of the goddess Mazu felt like the perfect legend for today's tale. She's a goddess whose stories have migrated, moved, and traveled throughout the world, and she's become a legend that exists in so many different forms. Hong Kong became just one of her safe harbors, and I think both Lim and Chan's novels find peace there too. So with that, dear travelers, thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure on what I've been reading, what I've been researching, and what I've been enjoying at the moment. I am so glad you guys joined me for today, and hopefully next time we'll have Sparrow back. And remember, if you do miss us and you want to see more of us, you can always reach us on our website, www.talesfromthenchanted.com, for any show notes and any other book discussions. We also can be found on any social media site, either as from @Enchanted or from the podcast name. Or if you are old school like Sparrow, you can always email us at talesfromtheenchantedforest@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your comments, questions, and suggestions. And because Sparrow isn't here, I guess I'll do the iconic line. And remember, there's always a place for you in the Enchanted Forest.